Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Timothy. We back. So I'm Timothy Welbeck. I am a civil rights attorney. I am a professor of Africology and African American Studies. I'm an author and contributing writer. But before I wrote books and contributing articles, before I taught in universities, before I practiced law, I rapped. And I have a new project. It's called The Cost of Living. And with that, I'm sharing some of these experiences that led me to be a civil rights attorney, that led me to be a professor of Africology and African American Studies, an author, in addition to that being a husband and father. A lot of those stories and what makes me me are caught up in this. And so this series right here is called Rhyme and Reason, and it talks about the content, the themes, and the motivations behind what makes the cost of living. Today I'm excited to tell you about this song called We Culture. So this song is produced by Joshua Heath. Joshua Heath is a former student of mine. He's gone on to become a producer, one of the most sought out producers in our space. He produced this record and is featuring Nezi. If you're not familiar with Nezi, you need to stop what you're doing, go listen to her music. I got some links below for you to do that. And I'm just excited about this particular song. It samples one of my favorite Ebo Taylor records, and it captures just what it means for people of African descent to just celebrate the idea that we create and embody the culture that drives global pop culture that the world has come to love and adore. And it captures this duality of that reality that we create the culture that drives the world's popular culture, but are still derided by the same people who say they love our culture. And so that's what the song's talking about. So the hook says, we culture. We the real rock stars. You take what we make and try to say it's not ours. We culture. Who we are is art. You can imitate, but what is in our heart is culture. And that's really the core of much of what we're saying in the song. We are culture. The lifeblood of this culture as we as a people and the expressions that we emanate. We are the culture. And so the quote there is an allusion to a Kanye West quote from a Zane Lowe interview from 2013 when he was promoting Yeezus, I'm sorry, that's the name of the album. But he was promoting that album, and he got to a point where he was saying, we the real rock stars. And he was just talking about how rappers are the drivers of pop culture at the time. And so I'm kind of taking it a step further because rock is black culture too. That's a whole nother conversation. But just the idea that some of the central figures in what drives pop culture are just people of West African descent, both on the continent and across the diaspora. So we the real rock stars. You take what we make and try to say it's not ours. And so in many ways, that's what's happening. Even the idea of saying that rock is not ours is a perfect example of that. Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, these are some of the pioneers of what we now call rock music. They created this by blending chord progressions from blues and chord progressions from gospel, adding some of the rhythms of boogie woogie blues and kind of interpolating that and creating something new. So even like rock is ours. And folk have taken that, try to pretend it's not ours. It's crazy. But anyway, so that's what the song is talking about. So my first verse goes something like this. You love our culture, hate our people. Dub us vulgar, imitate what we do. That's really the thesis of the whole song. In it, I'm talking about you love our culture but hate our people. It's been said many times by many different people, but I reiterate here that if the world loved black people the way the world loved black culture, black people wouldn't have no problems. It's really that simple. But people take what we make and imitate it and then say we're vulgar. And in that way, it captures some of the cognitive dissonance of white supremacy. I saw Dr. Mark Lamont Hill talking about this once a couple of years ago, and he was just talking about the irrational nature of white supremacy. You'll say Africans are dirty but want them to clean your home. You'll say Africans are savages, but you will have your way with their women and want them to also raise your children. You say that Africans are lazy, but you want them to work for you. It doesn't make sense. And so ultimately, that's what I'm trying to capture here. You love our culture, hate our people. You say we're vulgar, you dub us vulgar, but imitate what we do. So we're vulgar somehow, but you still want to do what we're doing though. Go figure. Lunch on hors d'oeuvres and get some things that feeds you grinning and sinning while we give you the things you feast to. That kind of continues it, but it also just that continues that prior idea, but it builds on it. It talks about just this notion of how we create things of substance. People try to diminish that, take that, move on with it, and try to consume that and not acknowledge the full context of it. One of the perfect examples of that that's happening right now is this whole controversy around people talking about slowed plus reverb. Folk have gentrified, chopped, and screwed. And acting like some dude named DJ Slater created this whole genre of music that has been existing in South Texas for literal decades. And feasting on that while we have given you the things feeding on that when we give you the things you feast to. That's kind of what I'm talking about. We taught drums to talk, hummed and waltzed, sung without pause even when hummed and mauled. The change we gave couldn't constrain our songs, so when we sang our songs, the world sang along. This portion right here is talking about how the crucible of oppression that was chattel slavery robbed us not only of our personhood and stole us from Africa, but also removed from us the physical manifestations of culture. Our cultural artifacts were not brought with us. And so we had to create new ways of making music, and we still figured out how to do that. We taught drums to talk, we hummed and waltzed, sung without pause, even when hummed and mauled. We found ways to create culture even in the absence of all of this. And early on, there was this attempt at cultural subjugation whereby these European captors were trying to get these Africans to adopt their culture and sing their songs their way. And these Africans had a decision to make, and what they did was they took these songs, hymns, and spiritual songs that were forced upon them, but they sang them their own way. And in so doing, they ended up creating a whole new genre of music. We call them spirituals, and this is the foremother of all Black music in America. Frederick Douglass has a great quote in talking about this, and that he was saying that there are some people who say that enslaved people sing because they are happy with their lot in slavery. But that could not be true, but it's actually the furthest thing from the truth. What he goes on to say, and I'm paraphrasing, is that these enslaved people don't sing because they're happy, but they sing most when they are most unhappy. And the singing soothes the soul in the same way that tears soothe the soul when you're crying or you're sad or melancholy. And so that's basically what I'm trying to capture here. Even in the midst of oppression, we found ways to create. We created, and then while in the midst of all this oppression, we created, and then the world begins paying attention to what we're doing. And when we sang our songs, the world sang along. And so now I'm bringing this to contemporary times. So you see these things on TV screens, the children perceive these things, believe in we see. And basically, I'm kind of continuing that idea of saying, like, so here is the past iteration of this. We created this culture, you're taking it and trying to, we created this culture in the midst of oppression, and now you're paying attention to it when you realize that you couldn't stop what we were doing. And so we see somewhere in America, Miley twerking, under that mascara, how do you want to be a Black person? Puckering their lips, shuddering their hips, lining their purses till it suits their purpose. Being Black adjacent might take you places you can imitate it, but you can't duplicate it. We cultured. And so I feel it's pretty self-explanatory, but Miley Cyrus is a culture vulture. When it was convenient for her to leverage her whiteness in Black art for attention, she was doing that. She was making songs with any rapper or producer who would make music with her, and went on to be as vile and vulgar and as provocative as she could fathom to be. And then when she wanted to retreat back to this notion of white womanhood and all of the images and the sanctity and the safety that comes with that, she went to that and then reviled hip-hop culture and talked about how it's toxic and misogynistic and sexist. and how she wanted nothing to do with it. But then when it's convenient, she wants to talk about WAP and other things like that. Miley's a culture vulture. And so with that, Jay-Z had a line where he kind of alludes to that, but he was talking not about Miley being a culture vulture. He was mostly talking about this notion of how hip hop is so ubiquitous that even someone like Miley Cyrus, who at the time was still viewed as like Hannah Montana and has this pristine, innocent image as this child star, she's somewhere doing this thing. She's somewhere twerking, and he was trying to capture that. I kind of took that and built on it. Somewhere in America, Miley's twerking, and under that mascara, Kylie want to be a black person. Kylie Jenner's another. She benefits from the notion of having the benefits of the association of whiteness, but she uses the aesthetics and the deportment of black women to her advantage. So she wants to have all of the advantages of black womanhood, and has even gone through surgery and had different makeup lines, and she tans her skin at times to depict herself in ways that are associated with black women, but does not come with it or does not receive the harsh and violent treatment, the misogynoir that black women receive. And so I kind of talk about that, puckering their lips, shuddering their hips, lining their purses to the suits their purpose. Both of them profit off of this. I mean, like, one of the things that people talked about with the whole controversy behind WAP, like once people were like arguing about that, one of the things people were saying was, here Kylie is in this video, and you have two black women who have built the song and built all of the fanfare or attention around it, and then here Kylie comes in inserting herself in the video, gets all this attention, and then entertainment magazines and publications are listing her as the star of the video, where she has like a 10-second cameo or something like that. I ain't watched the video, but something like that. She's got this brief cameo or whatever. And on top of that, she never even promoted it. So here she is getting this association that's going to mildly benefit her, but she doesn't do a reciprocal thing to help the two people who put her on, so to speak. Being black adjacent might take you places. You can imitate it, but you can't duplicate it. We culture. And so then we go to the chorus, and then here comes Nezi, and she comes in with a fire verse. So I reached out to Nezi, asked her to be on the song. I don't know if Nezi knows this, but originally I was going to ask Nezi to be on A Place to Call Home, because Nezi often talks about her Nigerian ancestry, but being raised in the States, and I thought it would have been a dope way to kind of bring her in to talk about that. And so what ended up happening is I saw her post this cipher from Africa Day, and the content of that was like perfect for this record. And so I've been wanting to work with her for a while. I first saw her at a Texas Tech 90s themed cipher, like, I don't know, this is like something like maybe 2016 or something like that. And she bodied everybody. I said, I don't know who this is, but I'm gonna start following her, so I did. So we started following each other on Twitter. So I've been waiting for an opportunity for the right moment to work with her, and I thought it was A Place to Call Home. Then this song materialized, and I said, you know what? I think this is it, after I saw that. So I sent this to her, I asked her if she would be on it, and she graciously agreed to be a part of the song. And so that's her verse. I'm gonna let her tell you about what's going on with her verse. And then originally, this song was also slated to feature an iconic artist. We got a tentative yes from him, but some things kind of fell through, and for a little while I kind of just sat on the song. Like, even before I contacted Nezi, I had my first verse, I had the beat, reached out to this artist, he said yes. Like I said, some things fell through, and I was kind of disappointed in just like it falling through in the way it did, not necessarily because of him, but just I wanted the song to be something like what I envisioned. And then one of my oldest friends, Whitney Vaughn, was in town. He helped me film the working professional video and the original intent video. If you have not seen that, links below. Thanks, Whitney. Whitney heard this when we were on our way to one of the locations for one of the shoots. And he says, Tim, what are you doing with this record? Like, put this thing out like right now. So that's what actually was the impetus for me to come back and like do the verse of this verse that you're about to hear. Because I had the first verse already, and so as I began writing the third verse, I was thinking like, well, I still want somebody else on it, and then that's when I hear Nezi's verse. on the African Day Cipher, and I already wanted to work with her for this project. So it was just really providential that it came together the way it did. But anyway, the third verse is, y'all act like a show of fineness prompts approval. But like with the bro Giannis Antetokounmpo, we're known as a freak in every lake or pond we do go, roaming outcasts like Antoine and Andre do know. So here, like, I'm talking about this notion of how people act like when one black person ascends to a level of fame and notoriety, that they no longer bear with them the stigma of blackness and all of the indignities that come with that. And while there is some truth to that some people reach a level of fame where they don't feel the everyday sting of racism in the way that the everyday people, everyday black people do in the most acute sense. They're still black and it's still America. And many celebrities have talked about that in an array of different ways. And so I kind of try to find a clever way to capture that idea. It's like, yeah, like you might like this ball player, you might like this television star, you might like this actor, or you might like this musician. So you act like that show fineness prompts approval, but it's not necessarily so. And the clever way I try to weave that together is Giannis Antetokounmpo. His nickname is the Greek Freak, and so with that, I'm basically saying we're known as a freak in every lake or pond we do go. Giannis was called the Greek Freak in Greece. He's called the Greek Freak here. So basically here abroad, anti-black stigmas abound, and so like. For Giannis, it's supposed to be a compliment. He's like supposed to be a freak of nature, a freakish athlete, but I was trying to play on that and just how we are often deemed to be freaks. And so we're roaming outcasts like Antoine Patton, and Andre Benjamin. Antoine Patton and Andre Benjamin make up Outkast, the greatest hip hop group of all time. Don't argue with me, argue with your mama. Anyway, so I grew up in Atlanta, the Atlanta area, and I spent a lot of my formative years there, so I got to see Outkast ascend from a group that had support in the city and regional support to becoming international superstars, and also creating one of the greatest discographies in hip hop history. And so I wanted to kind of mention that, but also just talk about how we're still outcasts, even when a few of us might be deemed to be exceptional, like they're outliers. So. Roaming outcasts like Antoine and Andre do know. So then I continue. So no, you can't go with bronzer to rock the skin tone. You can wash off the tan and still harm my kinfolk. And so here's to the people that want to adorn themselves in black aesthetics. You might want to like put the bronzer on your skin, or you might want to like put weave in your hair, but you can take that off. My blackness is not a costume. I still have to walk around. We still have to walk around and bearing this burden of blackness. And so no, you can't put this on because you can hold it momentarily, but you don't bear with it the stigma. And so you can watch the tan and still harm a kinfolk. If you pawn the replay, know who calls the temple, let the artist and the art, it could all be so simple. And like just kind of building on that, and a shout out to Rihanna, like I made a reference to her first single, Pawn the Replay, and just talking about if you want to play our music, you should still acknowledge who we are. And I kind of go on from there. You can't have our rhythm without our blues. That's what all of this is amounting to. So like basically I kind of bring you into conclusion. You can't have the joy of our rhythms without the melancholy of our blues that come together. They are R&B. That's who we are, R&B. That's what all of this is amounting to. If you don't move your feet, then we don't eat. What 3 speaks is true. This is another allusion to Outkast. And elevators. Andre says, if you don't move your feet, then we don't eat, so we like neck and neck. And so I'm basically trying to allude to that, where Andre was basically trying to say that he had a connection to the common man, because he's functionally saying that, yeah, like you might see me on TV and might hear me on the radio and think that I've got it made, but if you don't buy my music, I'm not in this position. So he's trying to say like we're in this together. And so what I'm basically saying is, yes, you might purchase the music that funds the lifestyle, so to speak. That's true. But if the only feat is you move your feet, so if the only feat as an act or accomplishment is that you're moving your feet, that you dancing real good, or you shaking your legs, or you on the 2 and 4, if that's the only feat, it's the wrong movement that you choose. There's a movement going on outside. where Black people are saying that we are demanding that America acknowledge and affirm us as people and live up to the full scope of its promises. And there's a movement going on outside, and if you consider yourself an ally, you must join yourself to it in some way. And so, if your only feat is that you're dancing with us, you're not doing enough. That's basically what that line is saying. So if the only feet you move your feet is the wrong movement that you choose, rethink a thing or two when you proceed to sing our tunes. See the people too if they sweep you out your shoes. And when those hips are swaying, whenever you play it, know you can imitate it, but you can't duplicate it. We culture. That's we culture. Stay tuned for the next record. Nezi, I think we got